Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. My video schedule has been crap, and I apologise. I have tried to answer. Cockatoo has decided that he wanted to be part of the soundtrack. I have tried to answer anyone who's reached out to make sure that I'm okay. Everything's fine. I'm trying to post on Facebook and Instagram when I'm not posting videos, just to make sure that there's some contact there. It's just been really hectic. We've had 2 days of complete, full on rain. It's been over 50 mils over the 2 days. It's only just stopped today, at lunchtime. We're supposed to get the bulldozer guy out here to help clear some space for the new patio, and he couldn't do it because it was too wet. So we've had that going on, but really I'm just really focusing on getting that website going. So I've got a food prep video for you today. And every time I do these, everyone asks about recipes and stuff, and I'm trying really hard to get that website finished. I have spent so many hours this week getting it sorted, so hopefully I can, the fingers crossed is to launch it on the 1st of October, and hopefully have the shop set up as well, so that we can start doing the orders for the Christmas stuff, for the family trees and the mugs and the stickers and all that sort of stuff. Everything's starting to arrive, and I'm starting to photograph and price it all up and get packaging and everything for it, so fingers crossed. But for today, I've got a food video. I do need to do the chat video. I've been saying I'm going to do it for the last couple of weeks since I got back from, it's actually been 4 weeks since I got back from the last supply run, and I have been saying I'm going to do a bit of a chat video, and I just haven't got to it. Darryl is off to church tomorrow with a few of the kids, so maybe I will sit down while they are gone and try and get that done as well. Just sort of getting everything that I want to say and share and stuff sorted has become a little bit of a thing. I think once I start talking, then it'll come a bit smoother, but we'll see. But today is another food prep planning preserving video, so for anyone joining me, though, I don't know why anyone would have stuck through that little bit of squirrel to find out what was going on, if you haven't been here before. We shop every 8 to 9 weeks. At the moment we're doing 8 weekly because of just timing up to Christmas. So the last shop there'll be an 8-week gap from the time that I went shopping to the next one, and an 8-week gap to the next one, and then we'll see what happens after Christmas. And I'll figure out timing then. So because we only shop every 8 to 9 weeks, we have to sort food out in a slightly different way to the average family that shops every week, 2 weeks kind of thing. And so I started sharing that, and everyone really enjoyed it, so I've continued to share it. So I think this is 3 days, the next 3 days following on from the last video that had the first 2 days of the food prep planning and preservation for it was the end of August that we did this shop. So the next one's in October, this one was the end of August, and it's now September, so time flies. I really find it difficult sometimes to fathom the time as well. I looked at my YouTube stats this morning, and it's been I think it's been a week. By the time I get this out tomorrow, it's been a week since the last video, but that week has flown, and part of that I think is because of the 8 to 9 week grocery periods. 8 weeks is a long time, but when I get closer to the next shop, it's it wasn't any time at all, which is why I think that eventually I'll be able to drag it out a little bit further. We shall see. We'll probably need another freezer. We need to get the kitchen finished, all those sorts of things. But maybe the plan is to end up doing it 4 times a year instead of 6 times a year. We'll see how we go with that. But the YouTube algorithm won't appreciate me doing it even less. So I've had a bunch of new subscribers since the last grocery haul, so welcome to anyone who's joining for the first time, though I have had one prep video done. There's a second one, but we'll see how we go. So let's get into this rather than I keep on squirreling, because I think it's late afternoon. I did say I wasn't going to do these late afternoon anymore because I'm tired and rambly and all that sort of thing, but it rained all morning, and I really want to get this done so I can get it edited tonight and out tomorrow morning. So let's get into it. So Kavik has been my helper in the kitchen lately. He has been really keen on coming in and giving me a hand, which is lovely, and they all go through it to a degree. It would be nice if they were a little bit more consistent with wanting to help out, but I think it depends on the food that I'm prepping as to how much they want to help out, and because it's berry season and fruit season, then they're more inclined to help. So what we started off with was some bananas. So I got 2 boxes of Seconds bananas. They were very ripe by the time I got them, so they needed to be worked on fairly quickly. We do freeze a whole lot. I don't know if I show it's freezing freezing them, but we do peel them, lay them out on cookie sheets, flash freeze them, and then throw them into bags, and we use them for ice cream or for smoothies, or the kids will just eat a frozen banana as is. They like the fruit frozen, so we freeze as many as we can fit into the freezer as well, but I do like to use them fresh as well. And you can use the frozen ones for baking too. You can just puree them up. They discolor a little bit as they defrost, but when they're in baked goods it doesn't really matter. But we started with my standard banana bread recipe. I'm pretty sure there's a short on that one. I'll try and find it. It's a very simple one bowl recipe for the Thermomix, blending all the wet ingredients, adding the dry, mixing, scraping, folding in the chocolate chips. I like to use cinnamon in my banana bread, but it's optional, and we like to have a good amount of banana in it. I also use oil instead of butter, but it's basic. It's a very basic recipe. Flour, sugar, oil, egg, banana, cinnamon, bit of salt, and some bicarbonate baking powder. So a really simple recipe, but super tasty. One batch fits nicely in my cast iron loaf pans, and I also mixed up a second batch. We've got plenty of eggs at the moment and all those bananas, so it was worth making 2 loaves. I have 2 pans, may as well make 2, bake them both at the same time, use the oven appropriately. We also decided to make some basic banana muffins, seeing as, again, heaps of eggs, heaps of bananas. Kavik helped me mix that batter up as well, and again, it was pretty much a throw everything in the Thermomix recipe, because that's the favourite. It's a favourite baking recipe. A lot of these recipes where, you know, you're going to sift dry and add half the dry to the wet and all that, I get very impatient. So one bowl recipes are really good for me, and being able to use the Thermomix is even better. So we just threw it all in the Thermomix, mixed it up, and then used a large ice cream scoop to measure out the batter. I got this really neat 3-pack of scoops from Amazon, and I find them all a really good size. The small one works really well for meatballs, the big one works well for this muffin size, and the handles are large and slightly like padded. They've got like a rubberized to them, so I find them easier to squeeze, because I find squeezing things quite difficult with the carpal tunnel and stuff, so having the rubberized handles makes them a bit wider, and the spring it rebounds well. They're quite a nice one. I'll try and remember to link them in the description. I'll have to find where I got them from Amazon. I'll just have to go back through my history. I also did 2 batches of these. One batch filled the 24 holes, and then I did another batch that I put on once these were done. I only own 2 muffin trays, and I don't really make muffins all that often, to be honest, because I just find them fiddly. Slices and loaves are so much simpler, but the kids do enjoy muffins. I do normally buy the compostable papers for them though, so that they can just throw it straight in the compost bin, but I bought cheap ones this month at shopping because I couldn't find the compostable ones, but that's fine. It just means that they can't go in the compost, they have to go in the bin. The next thing I did was work with the rest of the strawberries. So after all that jam and stuff, we still had a fair few strawberries left, and I didn't want to just freeze them. So I pureed them up and put them in a container yesterday after we'd finished them to do something with today. In summer, I make a lot of yogurt and granola for the kids. They no longer reach for the instant porridge in the warmer months, and instead reach for more cereal type breakfasts. But I don't buy enough cereal for the whole 8 weeks. This is their first breakfast of the day. Darryl and I have a cooked lunch / brunch sort of thing at like 10-11 o'clock in the morning, and they have that as well. So whether that's freshly baked bread and eggs and bacon or sausages or whatever, they have that as well. But their first breakfast that they have first thing in the morning, self-serve, generally is something cereal like. But boxes of cereal take up a lot of room in the groceries, so I only buy enough for a couple of weeks, and they're very, like, what's the opposite of nutrient dense? So, you know, it's handy for them to be able to have that quick meal, but they're not my first choice of things for them to eat. Instead I make yogurt and granola, and it's full of nuts and seeds and all that sort of thing. They like their yogurt slightly flavoured or sweetened, like most children. So what I do is when I have excess fruit, I puree it up and I can it. I add a small amount of sugar and citric acid to help keep the colour and the flavour vibrant. A bit more sugar with some fruits than others, because some are tart and some are sweet. And then I bring it up to a simmer to dissolve that sugar and fill small jars with it. These little 250ml jars work really well. I use a whole one of these little jars in a 2 litre of homemade yogurt, and that's a good amount to give a slightly sweetened, fruit flavoured yogurt that they then put the granola with, and the granola is also slightly sweetened with maple and that because I toast it. So I tend to, I've made it before on the channel, but I will need to make it again soon, so I'll record it when I do. But we did a chocolate granola that they really liked last year as well. So I'm actually out of cocoa. I forgot to buy it when I did my groceries, and I hadn't done an honest to goodness order. But anyway, so chocolate granola might be out. But I do make them maple flavoured granolas and all that sort of thing. So once I make the granola, I'll film it. But they really enjoy the yogurt with that fruit in it. Even little jars of apple butter works really well. So if I have a surplus of apples, which I got 90 kilos of apples or something one year and made apple butter galore, but I haven't had luck with getting that kind of quantity of apples again in an apple season. So yeah, anyway, just that was a random thought that crossed my mind. But apple butter works as well. Any sort of fruit, 250 mils to the 2 litres of yogurt seems to work quite well. The next thing I did was some more cordial. Now, I got another 4 litres of orange juice. We'd tasted the previous batch of cordial and it was good, so I felt it was worth making another batch with all these seconds oranges. I used more of the frozen strawberry puree from last season, and I also put a jar of canned blueberries in this one, seeing as I didn't have the strawberry tops that I used in the previous one. So these jars were just blueberries, about a couple of tablespoons of sugar and water, and then processed. So it's basically blueberries in its own juices, a bit watered down. Sometimes I thicken these and cook them up as a compote for pancakes, or I'll add them to a crumble or a pie. They've been really neat to have on the shelf. Just a bit more colour and flavour for the cordial by adding this jar. Blueberries are a little bit tart, and they don't have huge amounts of flavour in this kind of a situation, but they will add some really nice colour. I brought it up to a simmer, just like a previous batch, added the sugar, the tartaric acid and citric acid, and then strained the solids out, being mostly just the blueberries in this particular batch, with the solids, that the skins from the blueberries were the main thing. I mustn't have filmed the next part of the process, being that I've already shown it, but I filled quart jars with the cordial, cleaned the rims, lids and rings finger tight, and into the steam canner for 20 minutes in the dark green zone for my altitude. The next day, a task that needed doing was to sort out the rest of the chicken thighs. I don't appear to have filmed me cutting them up, and I have shown that a lot each time I've done this, but my filming this month has been a little bit lackluster. But these were the boneless, skinless chicken thighs from Costco. I sliced them into strips to make them easier to cook up and versatile for what I want to use them on later. I split them into 2 bowls. The first bowl I put a buttermilk marinade on. Soured coconut cream or milk kefir is what I tend to use, along with some standard spices, you know, your paprika, your garlic, onion, salt and pepper, that sort of thing. And that can sit in that marinade for a couple of hours or overnight, depending on how the food plans progress. The other bowl I ended up splitting into 2 to make sure that I could coat all the meat, because it was just a little bit hard to work in with one bowl. And I did my standard marinade that I do on these thighs each month, because we use these as grilled meat for just a myriad of things. I use cowboy candy, garlic, paprika, salt, pepper, bit of Worcestershire sauce, sometimes some lemon juice, sometimes some oil, depends on what I feel at the time, and marinate it with that flavour. I tend to cook this up straight away. It coats the meat and that's fine. It can sit, but generally speaking, timing wise, I just end up cooking it up. And I like to cook it all up and store it cooked. It goes in the fridge for a couple of days to eat for easy meals while the kitchen's busy, and then after that day or so it goes vacuum sealed into the freezer to add to pizza, pasta, wraps and many other things later on in the grocery cycle. I just remember that it was out for a couple of days before it's frozen, so we rapid defrost it for the day that you're eating it. So we just cook it off in batches in the cast iron, not overcrowding the pans. We don't want it to stew in its own juices. We want that cowboy candy to get sticky, slightly charred, and add that flavour to the chicken. That coating also helps it to not dry out, because we reheat this a lot in other dishes, so we want it nice and moist for when we reheat. So that sticky cowboy candy brine helps to seal in the juices of the thighs. We also don't overcook them at this point. We make sure that they're cooked, but not overcooked. Even if people complain about my food looking burnt all the time. Seeing as we're doing that, we did taco type things for lunch. So just some chicken. There was probably cabbage on there because I shred it. When we have cabbage, I shred it up nice and fine for things like this. Some mayo, all that sort of thing. Just in some tortillas and toasted. Simple but filling. While we already had that chicken accessible, because I like to use the food that I'm making rather than put it away and pull something else out instead. For dinner that night, and more meals than just dinner, I cooked up the buttermilk chicken. So I have a large plastic container that I put flour and seasonings in, all the same as what's in the marinade: salt, pepper, garlic, onion, paprika, that sort of thing, and I dredge the chicken. The key here is taking plenty of the liquid into the flour with you, which creates those flakes of flour which give it that flaky, crispy sort of a crumbing. You want the liquid in the, I know a lot of things you want to drip all the liquid off before you dredge it. This one you want the liquid to go in, and sometimes I even scoop a bit of extra liquid in there. Sometimes I add eggs and flour to the marinade ingredients and make it more of a batter than a marinade, and that's quite nice too because it gives it a little bit of a thicker coating. But I wasn't sure if I was cooking this same day or not, so I didn't want to add anything else to the marinade. I did end up cooking it, so I could have, but that's, anyway. I'm cooking it off in some rice bran or vegetable oil till the colour is right. Oil's not too hot, and being careful not to overcrowd the oil because you put the cold food in there, drops the temperature of the oil, and the chicken will end up soggy from the temperature drop rather than cooking nice and quick. As it cooks, I placed it on a rack over a tray to drip any excess oil off. We had this for dinner with veggies and potato, and the rest was put on a tray and in the freezer to flash freeze. I'll then put it in Ziploc bags for meals later on in the month. This is a messy job, long-winded, but by frying the chicken like this, it reheats so beautifully in the oven. So you just put it on a rack over a tray from frozen, and you get moist chicken with tasty, crunchy exterior for whatever you choose. Later in the month, this was used on sliders as a birthday dinner request for the twins this month. Next day, I also had to get the chicken breast sorted. Now, I don't use breasts for a whole lot of things. I prefer thighs, but there are some dishes that the breasts work really well. Quick cook curries, for example, or faux KFC chicken, things like that. Sometimes I fillet these so that they're in the right shape for things like schnitzels or KFC chicken, but this month I decided to just dice it all up and store it like that. We've been eating a fair few curries lately, and it's nice done like that. I diced it all up and put it in vacuum seal bags so it can go in the freezer for meals later on. I did a couple of kilo bags, a couple of 500-gram bags, so I have a choice depending on what I'm making with it, leaving some in the bowl to use for dinner tonight. Again, like I said, when I'm processing things, meat, veggies, whatever else, it seems silly to stick it all in the freezer and use something else for that night. May as well use what I've already got there, so that's what I do. I plan the meals in that first patch based on what I'm processing for that day. I used my Vivor chamber sealer, which I'm still loving. That one was gifted to me, even if it does take up a lot of room. And I've been buying the smooth bags that are already sealed on 3 sides and finding that the best way to deal with it. For dinner that night, I just made a simple curry ramen style dish. Kavik is on a bit of a kick with helping me in the kitchen this month, which is kind of nice. So he took over cutting up the broccoli for me. I cooked off the chicken with some garlic and ginger, some red curry paste, some coconut cream, a bit of soy, fish sauce and lemon juice, and a couple of pinches of sugar. I think I may have added some peanut butter in here as well. Once it was at a boil, I added in the broccoli to cook as well. I cooked ramen noodles in a separate pot. These are those Jin Mai Lang ramen noodles that we really like. They're $3.10 for a kilo from Coles. If you like ramen noodles, I highly recommend them. I was probably a bit overzealous here putting the noodles into the pot. I probably should have just divvied the noodles up into bowls and then scooped the soup over the top, but oh well. It tasted good regardless. It just made a bit of a mess on my stovetop trying to fit all those noodles into that pot full of soup. The next day I started off making some sourdough pasta, my standard pasta that I make, especially when I'm regularly feeding my starter to get it super active for bread baking. I make a lot of this pasta, and when we have eggs, it's the right season for eggs and starter, so then that's when we have it the most. 400 grams of flour, 100 grams of starter, 3 eggs and 60 grams of olive oil for the dough. It all goes into the Thermix and pulsed to like a ball stage, and then tipped out onto the dough mat and brought together into a ball. The pasta dough might seem a little dry when you bring it together, but that's okay because it has the starter in there. It will hydrate a little better than if it didn't. So a little bit dry is better than a little too wet, because sometimes after it's hydrated, that wet ends up being a little too sloppy, a little too hard to handle and roll out. I did 2 batches up, put them in a Ziploc or an airtight bowl, and left them at room temperature for a few hours to just do that little bit of a ferment. You can roll it out after a few hours, or you can put it in the fridge and use it sometime in the next few days. It has egg in it, so you just use it accordingly to the timing of something that has egg in it. It doesn't rise or anything. It does change texture a little bit though with the fermentation of it, so that is beneficial for it working. The next thing I got done was making some ice cream. Now, as I'm editing this and doing my notes, I noticed my mic cover is hanging a bit over the screen. Sorry about that. I do fix it in a little bit. One of the favourite ice creams we do is a lovely rich chocolate ice cream. I grate up 100 grams of chocolate in the Thermomix, then throw all the other custard ingredients in and cook. It's 1.2 litres of milk or cream, 4 egg yolks. I have scaled down the yolks in the ice cream for the creamy. When I was making ice cream for my standard churn ice cream maker, the higher the egg yolk, the richer the ice cream. But with the creamy, too many egg yolks, and when you spin it, it ends up a bit less like ice cream and more like a thick shake because it just doesn't freeze as solid because the egg yolks help to stop it from freezing as solid. Though the chocolate one tolerates the egg yolks better because the chocolate sets up a bit in the freezer because of the cacao butter. So there is some leniency in the chocolate one. I add a bit of vanilla, some sugar and a bit of cocoa to really push that chocolatey flavour, and then just cook it. It takes around about 9 minutes at 90 degrees on speed 3 to cook this custard. It doesn't have to thicken up or anything because we're using it for the ice cream maker. All you want is those egg yolks cooked and it to be nice and emulsified, so you don't want it to split when you put it in the creamy jar. I poured it into 3 of the creamy containers, 2 full ones and a single serve in the third. I actually own 15 of these creamy containers so that we can make single serves or larger serves, and so that we can have a variety of flavours to pick from in the freezer when we decide to have ice cream. For dinner that night we had Bolognese. So I rolled out the pasta that I had let rest from earlier, a little bit of flour on the board to help if it's a little bit tacky, threw on the thickest setting on my KitchenAid pasta roller. It's not the KitchenAid brand though one, it's an Amazon generic brand, but pasta roller on my KitchenAid, and then I fold it into thirds, rotate it 90 degrees and go through again, and then back through, dropping the thickness a couple of notches each time till I get down to the thinnest setting. I cut it by hand with my pastry cutter into wavy strips and hang it on the pasta rack. The generic one does have one of the pasta cutters as well as the flat roll out things, but I don't feel like it would be useful for me because I don't have anywhere to put all the sheets and then to cut them afterwards, and if you want to let them dry a little bit before you cut them, just briefly, and I don't have anywhere to spread them to dry a little bit before putting them through the cutter, and then I'd have to do all the flats and then put the cutter on, or I'd have to swap it. Anyway, I find it easier just to hand cut it with my pastry cutter, and I like the little wavy edge on the pastry cutter. I hung it on my pasta rack. Now Nyssa bought me this rack and has since sent me a second one after I mentioned that I would have to grab a second one, so thank you very much. Now I can dry a larger quantity. I do tend to do the larger quantities in summer rather than the cooler months because the damp can wreak havoc with the drying process. It just doesn't dry up as well. It tends to stretch a little bit, being that it's got sourdough in it too. Sometimes it'll stretch and break rather than dry. A fan on it helps, but you don't want it to dry too much either because then when you cook it, it crumbles. So you have to get that happy medium. So in summer works really well. A quick, dry, easy into the freezer. I store it in the freezer. And then so I can make a quadruple batch because one of these racks will hold 2 batches of pasta, so I can make 4 batches and get them all on the one rack, which will be really nice. Thank you very much, Nyssa. For the Bolognese, I just put a jar of my garden pasta sauce that I can. It's a bunch of different veggies, you know, zucchini, carrot, onion, garlic, tomato, all that sort of thing. I don't have I need to make a new batch, so I will share it when I do, and I don't have a strict recipe for it, so I pressure can it because then I don't have to worry about the ratio of acidic vegetables and stuff, and full of veggies, and then I put a jar of that into the pot, and then the Bolognese. Now the Bolognese isn't completely defrosted, so I'm breaking it up into little pieces and throwing it in the pot, which is fine because there's that liquid in the bottom. Bring it up to heat slowly so that it defrosts with the lid on it, and then once it's up to temperature, simmer it for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we serve it with the pasta. It's a super easy meal, but one that everyone loves, and with heaps of veggies in there as well. It's a pasta dish, but it's full of veggies and goodness and that sort of thing, so we eat it quite regularly, which is why I make Bolognese in large batches to have in the freezer. So that was the next few days of food. Now I think the next video has sausages in it, so I've actually got to sausages this month. Not quite as many as I would have liked. We did what we could, so I'll have the sausages for this month, I think, though I think my filming was a little bit lackluster, but you know, I did what I could this month. It's been a bit of a rough one. So I think that's on the next video. And then I don't know where we're going from there. I will try and do the chat video tomorrow while they're at church. I'll see how I go, see if I can find somewhere to sit down and do that. Show off the new, we did get two sorts of garden frames. I put that on Facebook today actually. I think we've finalised the design that we're going to do for the frames for the gardens, but the problem is that we can't do any trellis stuff inside them because they're too low. So I have to decide. I might do some Florida weave bush tomatoes maybe. I don't know what I'm doing yet, so we'll see. So we've got that I want to show you as well. And yeah, mostly I'm just working really hard on the website and some of the designs. I sent stickers away. I'll try and put a little photo in here of that. The stickers, they're due to arrive next week. And I got I've got a bunch of stuff that I want to share, but I just don't want to share it until I've got it sorted. And the family trees, so I'm going to take some footage of laser cutting the family trees and stuff out for you too, and we will go from there. So a bit all over the place this month, and I think I've said that most months recently because life has just been a little bit all over the place and hectic, and we just do what we can, don't we? So thank you for joining me again today, guys, and I will see you on the next video.